start by saying thank you so much for being here. It was like a whole journey to even decide to have a book launch. It feels, I went through a whole thing of it feeling very narcissistic, but actually it's been such a team project that this is very much about celebrating the whole team and all the many contributors, many of whom are here tonight. So it's really exciting that we're all here celebrating together, because it's been a huge team effort and also such a massive journey. Jesus Christ, if somebody had told me at the start how hard it is to write a book, I don't think we would have bothered. But at each point we'd already, we were too far invested to stop, so we just kept going. So I just wanted to talk a bit about the journey, although many of you will know aspects of this, but I think the journey to this book started, how many years ago did we convert our first van? 15, 13, anyway, somewhere between 13 and 16. And in those days, there was no such thing as a book. I mean, there wasn't even the wonders of YouTube. We couldn't even find Greg's videos in those days. There was just one forum that we spent an awful lot of time on, but we would have absolutely loved something like this. So that was, I would like to say that we thought of the idea, then we didn't. But anyway, that's where the seed was sown. And of course, Quirky Campers was born, and it has continued to flow and develop as people have asked for different things, up to and including a conversion book. And we are in the incredibly lucky position of being in contact with loads of experts, so we knew that we could do something quite unique, because it wasn't just going to be us writing our idea about one way of building a camper van, but we could actually draw on lots of different expertise, which would mean that we could both kind of make it really user-friendly, but also go into some quite technical depth where it's needed. So we started writing the book 2.5 years ago, 3 years ago, and we published it as an ebook December 2020, and then thought about printing it in 2021, and then just kept going and going, because we just really wanted it to be so good. And every time we thought about putting it in print, we were like, this thing isn't quite how I want it to be. I'm going to ask each of these wonderful panellists to introduce themselves, say a bit about their background, and also what they think special about this book, and then we're going to have a bit of a Q&A. Now, I don't know what kinds of questions people are going to ask, but we are prepared for questions like, what kind of GSM is this paper, to I've got a medium wheelbase Ford Transit, what layout do you think I should have, because I've got 4 children and 3 dogs. So whatever your questions are, we're going to try and answer them. So I'll give brief intros, but then I'll let each person introduce themselves. So this is the wonderful Lauren Depass, who joined Quirky Campers a year ago, and one of the things that I said in her job interview was, you're going to have to make us a book. This is David, who many of you know, who started Quirky Campers with me, and actually has written a fair few bits of the book or contributed his technical expertise. And this is Greg Virgo, who many of you will know from YouTube, and if you haven't come across him and you want to convert a campervan, you do need to check out his videos. And he contributed a chapter of the book, and also knows an awful lot about converting campervans.
So we built the van. We both handed our notice in at work on the 30th of June 2018, and we're going to do the year travel, set off in the van, and 4 years later we're still travelling. So yeah, we're full-time in the van. We've been full-time for those 4 years, and vlogging it, and obviously we did a really detailed set of build videos on YouTube. It's just been an absolutely fantastic experience. Yeah, it's been absolutely amazing. And the contribution to the book and why the book is so good, when I was building my van 5 years ago, I did hundreds and hundreds of hours of research and looking at different blogs and videos. Some were good, some were terrible, and it was difficult to sort through what advice was good advice and what was bad advice. So the advantage of the book is, it's sound advice in there, and it's all in one, easy to get to. You haven't got to thumb through hundreds of videos and whatever, it's all there. So yeah, this is a great resource if you're doing your own van.
David?
Wow, me with a microphone in my hand. Nice to be. I don't join. My background is in civil engineering and renewable energy, so naturally the technical aspects of the book are the bits that I'm drawn to, but I've also got a lifetime experience of doing carpentry and have built my own house. So the carpentry chapter was where most of my input went, but also been reviewing lots of the other elements, more technical elements of it. This is it's been a really full-on project to be involved with, and even though I've only been involved on a peripheral in a peripheral way, it's still taken up a huge amount of time and a huge amount of resource. But what I love about this is the number of people that have put into this, because there is a huge difference of opinion in the self-build world of how things should be done, and so it's trying to honour all of those different opinions whilst also trying to find not the only way but the best ways and highlight what those are as best we can. Invariably we're going to get it wrong, but our goal has been to try and sort of lay out what all those different ways are and the pros and cons of them wherever we can. And that's what I particularly like about this is this project, is that it's bringing all of that, as much of that as possible, together.
Hello, is that right?
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Lauren. I'm a writer for Quirky, so I write the van descriptions and things. And when I came on a year ago, she was like, yeah, let's do a book. Let's make this project. And it's been a very stressful, challenging project, but it is definitely worth it now that I can hold it in, like we can hold it in our hands. I've lived in a van for over a year with my partner James, who is at the back there, at the bar, and our 2 dogs. And before I got into van life, the only thing I knew when we went to pick up our van was, oh, it's got an oven, does it cook garlic bread? I didn't care about anything else, didn't know about anything else, I didn't even know I was like, long wheelbase, what's that? And then reading this book and like reading all the information, I was like, from looking at blogs first, it's quite intimidating. Whereas when I'm looking at the book, it's not intimidating at all. It's like tells you things that you need to know in such a simple but precise way. Probably because of the amount of experts that are in it. And yeah, it was just a pleasure to edit and contribute to and write. And there's so many pictures of different layouts and things like that I absolutely love, because I'm all about the pictures of the vans. I will spend hours doing that. Whereas they're all in the book, so that's my favourite thing I think about it. Thank you.
Thanks everyone. So we do have a bit of time for questions if anyone has questions. If you all just want to go and get drunk and party, that's fine too. Ira has a question, so thank you, Ira.
How long did it take to, I don't know how to say it, make a van you can live in, not just driving around in?
Yeah, that's a really good. Yeah, that's gone really good. So Ira's question is, how long has it taken us to actually convert vans into campervans? So when we did our first van, Bella, it was probably a year and a half, like of very, well, a couple of months.
When's it finished?
When's it finished? That's the problem. A couple of months to kind of, oh, sorry, a follow-up question?
Yes.
Parts that you get one?
How long does it take to name
Which question shall I answer first? Both. It's really hard to know. Our first van took a couple of months to make sort of livable, sleepable, and have a basic kitchen, but maybe a year and a half to feel anywhere near finished. But took a few years to name, because we went through a range of names before we chose the name Bella. But our third van, I'll skip the second one. Our third van took about 10 minutes to name. It was a family project and everyone put their names in, and when David said Frida, we knew that was right. And 3 months to build, but that's because we weren't building it, so we paid people to build that one. And I just want to point out that there is a whole chapter to help you decide if you want to build your own van, or commission a professional to do it, or buy one that's already built. So if you're not even sure, then there's something to cover that. Greg, how long did it take to build your van?
Yeah, we were both working full time, and our van was parked about 50 miles away from where we lived. So we couldn't even work on it during the week. I was commuting into London. So the only time I could work on it was at weekends, Saturdays and Sundays. And we convinced Lou's mum and dad to put it in their garden, because they were on a busy road. So they took the fence down, we broke the post down and reversed it into their garden and said, yeah, don't worry, a couple of months we'll knock that out in no time. Anyway, 14 months later, it was still in their garden, wasn't it? And I think if you look at our video where we go for our MOT after we'd finished it, and we dry it out of their garden, you can see Lou's mum and dad standing behind the shed going, yeah, they've gone. But yeah, so probably just over a year, but 2 days a week, so maybe just over 100 days of solid work. But I will say a lot of that as well was me filming, because obviously it was all documented for YouTube, so probably more than 50% of that time I spent setting up shots and filming stuff for YouTube and editing and things like that. Well, I probably could have done it in half the time if I was just building it.
Yeah, I have heard that the rule of thumb is about 300 hours, so that fits. It doesn't, yeah, it does say that. From Ira, from... Oh, no. We might come back to Ira.
In terms of living in your van, obviously we've looked quite a lot at sort of like tiny homes. Obviously they're quite static. What are sort of pros and cons of, I suppose obviously van, you get to move around, but what do you have to compromise on compared to sort of a tiny house?
I'm just going to repeat the question in case you didn't hear it. Oh, sorry, I've forgotten your name. Catherine, is that right?
I didn't say, but yes.
Catherine. So Catherine was wondering, should they looking at living in a van or a tiny home, and what are the pros and cons of a van versus a tiny home? Do you want to take this one, Lauren?
Yeah, I can give a few cons. No, living in a van obviously is absolutely brilliant. But I guess before I moved into the van, I had to part with so many clothes that I still think about to this day. Not gonna lie. And get rid of so much in our house, like my TV, my sofa. It's all worth it, 100% it's worth it, but at the time, when you actually get rid of that stuff, you do feel a little tug as it goes out the door. And then, I guess, the one thing for me is park-ups as well. Like, sometimes I get a little bit nervous if we're parking up somewhere wild. We've never, still in a year, ever had anyone knock on our van or had any trouble, but there's always that slight anxiousness. And also we've got a 35 kilogram Labrador that insists on sleeping in bed with us, so that is also a con. So yeah, that's about it.
I guess if I was speaking on behalf of my partner Lou, I guess it was losing the straighteners and the hairdryer, wasn't it? Because obviously we have to manage our power and that, so that was one of the things I said, no, you can't use them. But yeah, I'd agree with you, the park-ups is the only thing that we might struggle with in the UK. And sometimes you have to go onto campsites. But there's plenty of apps and resources, and the same as yourself, in 4 years, we've never had any problems wherever we've been, and we've wild camped quite a lot. So yeah, it's definitely doable.
Hi. Do you have any specific piece of advice for first-time builders using your book?
I think it's worth putting the time into planning. I think people want to get started, totally understandably, but you definitely want to take the time to plan. Also, I mean, this does sound like a plug, and it is a bit of a plug. Definitely try a van first if you haven't. If you haven't ever spent a night in a van, or I know many people who built a van without even stepping inside one, definitely rent one, even if it's just for a few nights, and find something that's similar to what you're thinking of. And then, so like a classic example is a lot of people think, oh, I really want a fixed bed because I don't want to spend ages making a bed. But if you try one out that's got a bed that you need to make up and you discover it only takes you 2 minutes and the space is worth it, or vice versa, you think the opposite and then you discover that you really can't be bothered to make a bed. Whatever it is, that that little learning makes all the difference, because once you've built it, it's very hard to unbuild and rebuild. Another little thing that I would say probably was put in an extra belted seat and an extra bed than you are going to generally need, because you never know when you might need an extra one. So that would be my top tips. Greg?
Yeah, the most important thing I think is knowing what you want to put in your van, having a layout set out and knowing the equipment that you want to put in it, because one of the first things you're going to do is run all your cables, run all your gas, electrics, all that sort of thing. So you need to have your layout pinned down right early on, because it is difficult to change things once you've lined the van and you start putting furniture in. That's a key point. But touching on what you said, Lindsay, we did exactly what you said. We hired Angel, which is one of the quirky vans, before we even finished our van, and it was a VW, a long wheelbase VW Crafter, so identical to a Sprinter, which is what we ended up with. And it was a very, very similar layout, and it really changed a couple of things in our build. We were going to leave the bulkhead in and do an L-shaped seat. That van had a double swivel seat in it, and we went with that idea because it just gives you so much more space. So hiring that van was brilliant for us.
No, that's exactly what we did with our most recent conversion. Over a 3-year period, we hired 5 different vans on quirky campers. Because we've got a family with 3 children, there's always compromise in any build that you do. So it's just a question of which compromises are going to have the biggest impact, and which choices you make are going to be the most difficult to deal with. So yeah, we tried 3 to 5 different campers with different layouts designed for 4 and 5 people, and from that, we figured out exactly what we wanted, and now we've got a layout that really, really works for us. But you just can't know it until you try it out. You don't know whether you might very quickly discover you don't need a shower permanently installed in your vehicle. It's a huge waste of space and weight, and tanks and heaters and all sorts of stuff that's completely unnecessary, because you find that actually, in reality, the way you use your vehicle is not going to be something you need, and you can better use that space for a million other things.
Yeah, I would say planning your budget around what you need and what you want, and focus on what you need first. So whether that's a toilet or maybe it is a shower if you have 2 showers a day, then maybe you need a shower in there. And then focusing on the ones afterwards, because like I said, it's really hard to unbuild it, and if you run out of money and you're left with something that you just wanted but you need something, then it's quite difficult to overcome it.
Andy, you had a question?
Yeah. A couple of you mentioned concerns when wild camping. I'm the same, always get nervous, like who's going to turn up. I don't know the details, but the new police crime sentencing bill looks like it's going through, how the laws are going through.
It's actually, it went through on the 26th.
Right. How do you think that's going to affect the whole van life community, campers, people living in their
So
vans?
the police crime courts sentencing bill, the one with a really long name, which has got so many different elements to it, but they're all in the same bill. So there's been a lot of protests against it, because one of the things that it does is to some extent outlaws protest that is inconvenient or noisy or whatever. But it's also made it a criminal offence, I think, not only to park up, but also to park up with the intent to stay there overnight on privately owned land. I think it's got anti-traveller racist elements to it. I don't know how much it's just designed to target that community. Regardless, I think it's really important that everybody stands together and protests against it. I mean, I don't know what happens now that it's in place. It's really, really, really sad. It's obviously it's going to affect wild camping. It's hugely going to affect people who are full-time living that way. People can be put in prison for it. They can have their vehicle confiscated. We haven't yet seen how it's going to unfold and whether or not it will be used, or, like I say, whether it is just going to be used to target specific communities. I really don't know. It's all very new, so we shall see. I don't know if it only matters if the landowner is going to raise a concern, or if you are visible to the police or visible to the local community. I'm sure there's still going to be loads of places in mountain ranges where nobody's going to move you on, but it's certainly, it's changed the police power significantly. Conclusions on that topic?
I mean, I don't know fully about that new law, but the one key point in there is it's parking on private land, so it's land that's owned by somebody else. So there's plenty of resources out there for you to find park-ups where it's okay to park. And things like, obviously, Park for Night app, the Britstop book now, this new release that's just come out is fantastic. There's hotels, farm stops, there's loads of different places where they don't charge, and they've allocated a number of spaces for vans to park overnight. So even though that's going to come in, it's not going to stop. You know, there's plenty of other options that you can go for.
That is a good point, and I just feel particularly upset about the bill, but that's a really good point. And there are a couple of innovations as well. So there's a whole group that are trying to get airs set up, or like equivalent, aren't there, in this country. So that would be places that have got provisions. And then also I know the National Trust have been piloting opening up their car parks for park-ups. So hopefully the response will be, different ways of making things available. Was there... I thought I saw somebody else's hand. Oh yeah, Theta.
Hi, yes, Space Fran.
Theta wrote a chapter of the book, by the way, everyone.
I was just going to ask the big question. How do you find a good van to convert?
Oh, God.
Afterwards. Have a look.
So there is some great advice in the book just in terms of like which is a good base vehicle, what are the things to look out for depending on which particular, whether you're buying it from a private seller or a dealer or whatever, and also things to look out for generally with vehicles. So do check that out. In terms of where you actually find them now, Greg, have you got any ideas? I really don't.
Yeah, I've just done a video on it because it's just really difficult at the moment. There's a number of reasons for that. During the pandemic, last couple of years, there's been a massive shortage of materials. So there's a massive shortage of new vehicles coming onto the market. So hence there's been a huge shortage in second-hand vehicles because all the big companies that normally swap their vehicles regularly, they haven't been available. So it's becoming more and more difficult to find a good vehicle. But in terms of what I do when I'm looking for a vehicle is I look for a vehicle that's got service history. Obviously you want to try and get one with least amount of mileage as possible. And I do vehicle checks and I pay for a vehicle check. It's really important because it will check all sorts of things in history. We've had a couple of vans that we were looking at where once I've done the checks on the history, found out that it had another engine and things like that, and they're not always obvious when you go and look at them. So that's a really good thing that we do.
Any final questions? Oh, yeah, Ira?
How long did it take for you to make the van?
I think we covered that one, didn't we? Oh, sorry, I didn't see you around there.
I've got two questions.
Okay, Rin has two questions.
Fine. One should hopefully be an easy one, which is more important, the age of the vehicle or the mileage and stuff.
Yes.
But then the other question is around tools. What tools are essential you have to have in your use all the time?
Yeah.
What things are like, maybe just wait because you're only going to need it once or borrow it from somebody. Like, which tools are relevant?
Okay, so two questions. What's more important, age or mileage? And the second one, what are the most essential tools? So on the basis of what I learnt when our mechanic friend did a workshop on this subject, he said that mileage was more important than age. So low mileage is more important. But you do need to make sure it's rust-free. So that's the age thing. But if it's a rust-free vehicle, the age he felt is not that important. We do also, if you join our book owners club, one of the additional resources you get is a base vehicle cost comparison tool, and you can put in the mileage and the age of a bunch of different and prices of the different vehicles you're looking at, and it will tell you which one's the best deal. In terms of the tools, I'm gonna.
Worth pointing out, it's only in comparison to the ones that you put in. It's not to the market. It's got no market information.
It just compares them to each other. Do you want to say anything about tools, David?
It's covered.
Exclusive information for book owners only. Yeah. Also, the tools have all been drawn by David's mum. They're very pretty pictures of tools in there. Greg, do you want to say anything about what you think are essential, non-essential tools?
Yeah, I mean, we had the luxury of a nice workshop with lots of fancy tools in it, but you don't need all of that expensive equipment to build a van, and our next van that we're planning to build will be done on a budget, and it will be done with simple hand tools. So obviously things like jigsaws, drills, they're sort of essential, and you can pick them up quite cheaply, even second-hand online. So those sort of things you do need. You don't need a table saw, you don't need a planer, all these huge, great big tools. So yeah, just a simple toolbox will do.
Yes, Sophia. Probably the last one.
I hear there's been quite a bit of talk about sort of my next van or my third van. So I just wonder if actually it's inevitable, like your first van is never going to hit the mark. Even if you plan it really well, do you think that's something to take into consideration when?
I think it varies massively. Like, we did have Bella for 13 years, but we converted her when we were just a couple, and then we had 3 children. So, you know, that was kind of obvious why we needed another van. Otherwise, we probably would have happily chugged on forever. Some people get really addicted, and literally the minute they're finishing their last van, they're planning the next one. Peter's nodding. But we actually now know with the layout that we've got that it was only going to suit our children to a certain height, and then we're going to have to come up with a plan B. So, yeah, is it inevitable?
Not for us, because we're keeping our van. Our van was built with basically everything we wanted in it. We didn't spare any expense on it. It was going to be a replacement for our house. So we put everything we wanted into it, and ultimately it cost us about 15 grand to do the conversion. The van itself was about £7,000. So it was over £20,000 we invested into that vehicle. This next project, for me, is going to be the opposite end of the spectrum. It's going to be a budget build, because I think there's a market, particularly for our videos, if you like, for me to do a van on a very small budget. Still turn out a good, working, useful van, but do it for as little money as possible. So recycle a lot of stuff. So that's why I'm building another van.
Yeah, so I guess we got our van like partly built. So I feel a little bit robbed that we didn't do all the cladding and all that things. I think we want to experience that. But also I think like the time where I am, I'm going to be turning 30 next year, and our van's a medium wheelbase, doesn't have a shower, doesn't have a bathroom, doesn't have much room at all. So I've always said to James, which he still needs some convincing, so if you see him tonight, convince him, I would like a double-decker bus, or and I'd like to convert from scratch, and I'd like to make a house on wheels with a bathtub in the middle of the double-decker. So if you see him tonight, pull him to the corner and tell him to get me a double-decker.
Not the chocolate bar. Okay, on that note, we're going to wrap up, and thanks again for coming. If you would like to buy the book, you can do so over the table. Lindsay, wherever she is, she'll be there. We've also got very pretty tea towels. Other than that, please just have a bit of fun. We've got this place until 10 o'clock actually, so if you want to hang around, maybe we'll find out some way to have a boogie. But yeah, just hang out, have some drinks. Thanks for being here. Yeah, you're all done.